to improve the lives of people in sugar-dependent areas.
Life sweeter for true.
Thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that, we having thy fair always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honour, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquillity of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Honourable House now resume its sitting. Call up the roll.
Mr. Whittle, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Shaw, Dr. Chang, Mr. Montague, Ms. Grange, Mr. Henry, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mrs. Robinson, Mr. Hutchinson, Dr. Tufton, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Mr. Spencer, someone's feet here. Mr. Green, Mr. Terrelong, Mr. Main, Mr. Ascott, Mr. Azan, Dr. Bloomfield, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Brownberg, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Clark, Mr. Heroy Clark, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Miss Daly, Mr. Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Fagan, Dr. Ferguson, Mr. Golding, Dr. Guy, Miss Hannah, Mr. Hales, Mrs. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kellier, Dr. McNeil, Miss Nito, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Miquelle Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Pickersgill, Mr. Redmond, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Stewart, Reverend Thwaites, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Wright. Somebody came in, isn't it?
Statements by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the government and members on this side of the House, I wish to welcome everybody back. I know we have had a long run at hopefully obtaining some rest, and we are now all fired up and raring to go once again. But I would like to pause now to extend my deepest sympathies to the member from Northwest Manchester who lost his mother only over the last, I think, 2 days, and also to the leader of the opposition for the passing of the mother of his eldest son. Our deepest sympathies. I know someone told me that you were with her right to the very end because they actually saw you with her at the university. So please accept our deepest sympathies and condolences on the passing of your mother. We go into this last lap, as it were, prior to Christmas, with great expectations for the improvement in the very manner in which we conduct the affairs of this Honourable House. I wish to indicate that as far as this side of the House is concerned, we have discussed what transpired last year, and we have all been of one resolve, that we will do everything possible to support where we feel it is necessary to support in the interests of the country. We will oppose vigorously those things that we feel that we hold a different point of view. And we will hopefully come out of it with a better understanding as to the strategies that should guide us going forward. We are seeking to engage in a non-confrontational manner, and by doing so, I think it will redound to the betterment of the image of this Honourable House, and we will gain greater respect from the wider population. I also wish to extend our sympathies to the family and friends and colleagues in this Honourable House who served with him for the passing of the late Easton Douglas. I served with him for many years. I knew him prior to his sojourn into political life. I found him to be a very, very hard-working, honourable, and pleasant person to work with. I had a great regard for Easton, and I felt that he carried with him a sense of dignity, and his attitude towards public engagement was not an attitude that was tribalistic or overly biased in the pronouncements that he made or the approaches that he adopted in discharging his responsibilities. To the opposition, I extend on behalf of the government our sympathies for his passing. I know he is a loss to you because he was active right up to almost the very end. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that you extend the usual traditional courtesies to one of our members who have transitioned, and ask for a minute's silence in memory of our late friend and colleague, Easton Douglas.
Mr. Speaker, as we are at this juncture, perhaps it might be appropriate for us to take the tribute to the former Minister, Member of Parliament, Mr. Easton Douglas, before I also join in saying my own opening words as we resume Parliament. We are grateful to the Leader of Government Business for mentioning the fact of the passing of Mr. Easton Douglas, and also in recognizing the passing of the mother of the Member of Parliament for Northwest Manchester. Mr. Douglas has served this Parliament with tremendous distinction, and we certainly want to, on behalf of the opposition, I know that the leader will speak in his own right, to extend condolences to his family, close friends, and we're also glad that this Thursday there will be an official funeral to give thanks to his life. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Phillips. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to thank the House Leader for his remarks and in relation to the passing of my former wife and mother of the Member of Parliament for Northwest Manchester. There's no doubt that she bequeathed to him a tremendous fiery spirit which was hers, and she was a remarkable person, and a great Jamaican and a great contributor to those causes which she thought dear, and those causes of our times. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to add my word of tribute in relation to the passing of the late Easton Douglas, Honourable Easton Douglas. He was a remarkable Jamaican whose career spanned involvement in the civil service as a town planner, who was a government town planner, rose to be a permanent secretary in the Ministry of National Security and in the Ministry of Construction. He subsequently decided that a political career should succeed upon his earlier career, and gave lengthy and exemplary service as a part of the political directorship of the country. He served as minister in the Ministry of Health, Ministry of the Public Service, the Ministry of Housing, but I think it is fair to say that in all his undertakings, his passion was really the development of the country's physical infrastructure. And he had a particular view about how to make our communities more humane by the way in which we structured them, designed them. And he certainly placed his own imprint on the country and its politics in the period when he served. I think a particular feature of his life was that he was able to be passionate about his own political convictions without being excessive or tribalistic or confrontational in the way he approached things. And we know that he had a particular personality, always dapper in appearance and well put together as far as dress and style was concerned. He always thought that he should have only the best, whether it was in relation to clothes, cars, wines, or anything else. He had a vision of Jamaica and a vision of the possibilities of the Jamaican. And I think we would all do best to honor him by keeping alive this vision of Jamaica being able to be the best, and for Jamaicans to be able to have the opportunities to be the best. He was a child of the Lower St. Andrew, the Maxfield Avenue, the communities on either side. And like so many of that generation, by dint of his own efforts, he went to Kingston Technical High School, was able to study and equip himself and qualify himself and give service. It's a notable example that he has left us, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask, along with the House Leader, that the sentiments of the House be conveyed to his family and that we remember him and follow his example. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues in paying tribute to Easton Douglas, who served as a Member of Parliament for Southeast St. Andrew from 1989 to 2002. As the opposition leader has indicated, he had a remarkable career and unique in the sense that he excelled in many and almost all aspects of his professional undertaking, from being a permanent secretary in 2 ministries, to being a minister of government in 4 different ministries, to being a qualified quantity surveyor, and being at the top of that profession. But for us in the constituency, he remained close long after his retirement. He was very knowledgeable, but never afraid to share his knowledge and advice to those of us who came after him, and certainly left monuments within the constituency which demonstrate his commitment, particularly to housing. So the Mountain Court housing development was one of his initiatives, so too the Langston Court housing development. He also believed in education, and in particular early childhood education, and was instrumental in the building of the Marion Road Basic School. And he nurtured the Ashe Performing Arts group when they just started, and actually provided a facility for them to operate from, which was the Nannyville Community Center, where they stayed for their formative years and which allowed the group to develop. So on behalf of the constituency, which I now represent, I want to express tribute to his career, tribute to his commitment to the constituency, to his party, and to the country, and to extend condolences to one of his daughters who now serves as a councillor within the constituency, but his entire family and friends who mourn his passing. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Bartlett.
I'd like to associate myself with the comments first made by the leader of the House and subsequently by the opposition leader and the member from Southeast St. Andrew. First, in regards to Mrs. Minna Phillips, who I knew very closely for a very long time in my very early years in politics when I represented Eastern St. Andrew. Minna Phillips, in fact, the entire family, and a certain member of the House who has just been elevated to being a vice president of his party, was then a little lad. And he used to jump around me, and indeed, he will tell you that. But his mother, Minna, was really part of the foundation of Cedar Valley Road and the general Ligani area. A strong family, and I remember his uncle, Minna's brother, who actually died in my hand at the Kingston Public Hospital. It was a very touching and difficult moment, but it's a moment that I'll write about in my memoirs because it's a very important chapter in our political history that needs to be codified and done properly. But Minna has led a life of great energy and spirit, and she contributed much because she had much to contribute. And she had a strong passion for fair play and honesty. And she also had a strong religious fervor, which was reflected in her faith. A fervor that burned deeply within her and wasn't enough to contain itself within even our own space in Jamaica. Geographically, she transcended here and went as far as to Africa. And I think that she stands today as a good example of a strong, powerful mother who, and I believe the leader of the opposition will agree with me, that she borrowed a page from Edith Clarke's book and did it so well that I think Miquelle perhaps can repeat the lines, even for the subject of the book, my mother who fathered me. So I think that we have a great example here, and a life that was well lived, and a treasured contribution that has been made to Jamaica. And this Honourable House has done well to recall her and to honor her in this regard. May her soul rest eternal in peace. On the matter of the great contribution, and I unhesitatingly say great contribution because Easton Douglas, again, was a member of Parliament who worked on the other side of the road where I was member of Parliament in St. Andrew. But a few people know that I had a little stint as opposition spokesman on housing. And yes, and we had great moments of debate and discussions together. One of the things that we agreed on, and which I found that we haven't done very much with in our own development strategies for settlement, is something which he called infilling. And I heard the phrase the first time from Easton when he looked at how the large lots that we had in St. Andrew were underutilized, and that whilst we were trying to build vertically, there was a chance for us to look at infilling to enable some of the depressed and blighted communities that previously had been strong residential areas to come back to life. But I believe that some of that has happened, and we have seen a number of those communities, in fact, coming back to life. But Easton, as the leader of the opposition said, was very urbane, and he was very anxious too. One of those guys who, when you were around him, there was a lot of life and energy, and dapper. Yes, he certainly was sartorially elegant. And he liked the better things of life, as was reflected in his lifestyle. But in Parliament, he was a strong and robust debater. And as a member of Parliament, as his neighbor, I can attest to the fact that he served his people well. Jamaica will miss him for this contribution in housing, and particularly his deep commitment to the small man and low-income housing and land utilization. And those are contributions that will live after him. So as we recall his life and we give honor to his service, we reflect on his family, and we especially reflect on Kerry, who has followed in his footsteps to a certain extent. And no doubt Julian doesn't want that extent to become too extensive. But she has become a servant of the people in the footsteps of her father. May his soul rest eternal in peace, and light perpetual shine on him.
Mr. Hilton.
Mr. Speaker,
I rise to acknowledge the passing of the mother of our colleague, member from Northwest Manchester, Ms. Phillips, who I've met on a few occasions, and we had very interesting discussions. Because, you see, she shared with me the passion for Africa and things Africa. And it is on that basis that we're able to meet and to discuss very interesting things. And so I join with the others who have expressed their condolences to the family for her passing, and we wish our brother, colleague, and family well in this very difficult moment. But, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also briefly mention and to pay tribute to Easton Douglas, as the others before me have done. The former member of this House was, as was said, up until his death, very active. He served as the leading member, I should say, on the task force that was put together by me as chairman to support the portfolio assignment in the shadow cabinet of physical planning and housing. He was a very pivotal member of that task force, and through that task force again supported the vision of our leader, the leader of opposition, with respect to the land settlement and urban development. He was very passionate about the focus of the opposition in housing, in land development, in land settlement. And the task force, the members of the task force would want me to express their sympathies, their condolences to the family, but more than anything else, the privilege to have served with former member Douglas, who, as I said, was a very pivotal member of the task force and very active and served well up until his death. And we'd like to convey our condolences to the family and to say how privileged we were to have had him as a teacher in those days, and we mourn his passing. We will miss him, and we acknowledge his family and wish them well in this period of their bereavement. So may his soul rest in peace, Mr. Speaker, and I join others for the House, wishing the House to extend tribute to Easton Douglas's family. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank my colleagues for kind words that they have expressed on behalf of my mother and my family. It has been a difficult time, and you know, she is one who has fought for equality not for her own self but for everyone that she has touched. She spent quite a few years in Africa, as my colleague over there would remember. She believed in everything that was, because of her faith and because of her belief in not only of where we came from, the continent of Africa, and her own, as we would say, troddings in life of herself and my father and others of their generation who thought that the equality that us as black people in our own land should have was one that she should have fought for all her life. And the days when she took back the remains, I remember the days of when she celebrated our own emancipation here before even the government of Jamaica recognized Emancipation Day. She was an innovator when we talk about vegetable patties now. Minis used to be doing vegetable patties and vegetarian food right there in Ligani. You know, she had the common touch, and up to her last days, I was reminiscing with some of her friends that she would give the last penny she had for somebody who was in need. And she would then call and say, I need more. You know, but she then carried back some remains from Seville, repatriated them to Africa, in Ghana. She was then named Queen Mother for the said village that those remains from Seville went to. But she gave everything to her own family. And, you know, most people think that I'm the first of her children, but there are 5 of us. My father has, four of us with my mother. And, you know, yesterday was when she took her last breath. We were all by her bedside. And I just want to say to those of you in the house who have been by her side right through her life, it would make any sense naming all, but there are some of you, and you know yourself who you are, who have helped her through her life. On behalf of my own family, I want to say thank you, and just to the wider Jamaica who has stood by her and given her her own chance to shine in this world. A great thank you on behalf of my own family and myself. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I couldn't allow this opportunity to pass without saying a few words, both for our former member, Easton Douglas, and for the passing of the mother of our own member, Miquelle Phillips. I'll start with Miquelle. Miquelle, I met your mom once at the graduation ceremony of your daughters. She was a very pleasant lady. She hugged me and she asked me, do you know who I am? And I said, no. But I suspect that there was some relation because she was with your children. And she says, I'm Miquelle's mother. And I said, that's where the looks come from. But she was she was a very pleasant soul, and when I heard a few days ago that she was ill, I was very surprised, and I did try to reach out to you, but of course you were otherwise engaged, and congratulations on that as well. And these things come at such an ironic time, at the heights of your celebration, but also the depths of the spirit, the passing of your mother. And we on this side, and I'm certain on that side, we commiserate with you, and we understand, of course, death is a part of life. On Easton Douglas, when I was a young MP just a few years ago, I had a opportunity to visit then Minister Douglas. I believe he was then Minister of Housing at the time, because I had a community in my constituency that I thought was a prime candidate for the Operation Pride program. And I went and sat with him to try and solicit some help, as all MPs would do. Of course, we ended up in a very long conversation. And what struck me about Easton was his humility. I was then, a young, new MP, and to have been afforded the opportunity to sit with the minister, I considered it a great honor. And I formed the impression that he was a very dignified person. He was immaculately dressed. He took pride in his articulation. And you could see that he was, from my perspective, he was the example of a statesman-like politician. He was very, and I keep using that word, very dignified and very humble and very gentle as well. Now, like most things, I came away from the office without anything. But I felt as if, yes, I got something. I left the office with a good sense of the person, that I got a fair hearing, and that there was someone who understood the issues, because we went off into a long conversation. And then I've had the occasion since to interact with him, even as chairman of the NHT, and even recently he came to see me as Prime Minister, and we had a long and good conversation. It was very sad when I heard 2 weeks Sunday ago that he had passed, and I immediately spoke with his daughter and expressed my own condolences. He is a patriot, a true Jamaican servant of the people, and again I will say the example of a dignified politician. His memory will live on through his service to the people of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, members, may it please you.
Members, we will stand for a minute in recognition of the former Minister, Easton Douglas. His soul rest in peace. Oh, sorry. I would, 1 minute, Mr. Phillips. I just want to advise members that a condolence book has been open, has been signed by members of the Cabinet, and we now have it in Parliament requiring all members to sign. It's outside, and I ask that you do so before you leave today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I now want to join with the Leader of Government Business in welcoming back our colleagues from, I suspect, much needed restful vacation, and especially the staff members of our Parliament. You know, Mr. Speaker, especially the ladies, they are looking far more beautiful after this rest, and we therefore have to try to make their life a little less hectic inside, far more beautiful than before. But, Mr. Speaker, I also would like to share in the comments, the sentiments expressed earlier by the Leader of Government Business in relation to the conduct of this chamber and the pursuit of the order of business on behalf of the people. But I think the member should just turn around and listen to this other comment, because for us to achieve this, I really am going to insist on greater orderliness in terms of how the agenda of the House is determined and communicated to the membership. I do believe that there has to be a greater attempt to ensure that we receive notices of the agenda in a much more timely way. There has to be greater dialogue between the leadership of the House, and I really am urging that this happen. Mr. Speaker, there was a significant improvement in the last session in terms of our punctuality. But towards the end of the session, we got back into the bad habit of starting these proceedings late. Mr. Speaker, people talk a lot about integrity, but integrity for me also extends to the respect that we show to our people. And people who expect us to conduct our business on time do expect to see us live on TV at 2 p.m. in the afternoon of our Parliament. And I'm really hoping, Mr. Speaker, that you, having done reasonably well in about a 3-month period to start on time, that we are going to see this chamber reverting to that. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the clerk for enabling the use of technology in the Parliament. We now have electrical systems at our feet, and that is one step in the right direction. Mr. Speaker, I have to again urge, in this day and age of technology and communication, this Parliament is lacking in acceptable broadband access. I am happy to hear that it is coming, because one of the ways for us to meaningfully utilize resources from the USF, and this is what it is intended to do, is to enable us inside here as well to have access to broadband internet service. And I urge that this be an avenue that we can revert to for assistance. So welcome back. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and we intend to conduct the business of the House in an orderly way on behalf of the opposition.
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Today we are going to, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to have a statement by the Minister of Mining and Transport, Honourable Robert Montague, and on the matter of public business, a bill shortly entitled the Transport Authority Validation and Indemnity Act 2016 will also be taken by Minister Montague. The law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, the Denham Town Community Zone extension of period of operation order 2018 will be taken by Prime Minister, and in addition to that, he will also take the Emergency Powers Continuance Resolution 2018. So, Mr. Speaker, we have an interesting day ahead of us, and I now invite you to proceed in that manner. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr.
Speaker, bearing in mind that you are dealing with the scheduling of the House, may I respectfully ask that the House Leader remember his promise for private members' motions to be scheduled during the sitting promptly. There are 19 in my name, and I'm sure there are others as well. And I would inquire of you, and through him, when these will begin to be taken, and also to ask that sufficient notice be given so that preparation can be made.
Mr. Seminole.
Speaker, the comments by the member from Central Kingston is quite timely because only today I had discussions with the Deputy Leader of the House and also the Clerk of the House, member of her team, to review the order paper and to see the extent to which there are a number of resolutions and answers to questions, etc., that need to be dealt with. Most particularly, I happen to have mentioned the fact that you have a number of such items on the order paper. We also took note of the fact that the member from Western Westmoreland should have by this brought the reports of the appropriations, the PAAC reports to the House. He has laid them on the table of the House, but he has not brought the resolution. And we are going to ask that he prepare himself and be prepared to take them on a timely basis. And I can assure you, member, that we will commence the process of getting rid of all these items that have been languishing for some time. And you will get adequate notice of our intention to bring them before the House. You can be assured of that. And I wish at the same time to say to the opposition leader, the leader of opposition business, that there are times with the best of intentions when there will be a delay in the commencement of the Parliament. I'm a student of Parliament. I've observed as a student at school in Canada, the Parliament of Canada in Ottawa. I constantly look at the procedures at Westminster and also in the United States Congress. And there is hardly ever a sitting that commences on the prescribed moment. So these things do happen with a situation where you have a number of people coming from various parts of the country to convene at Parliament. So that must be taken into consideration. We will make every effort to give you ample notice of the matters that will be brought on the day of the sitting so that members can be properly prepared, and I can appreciate that. So you have my commitment to seek to achieve that. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I ask that you proceed.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of Government Business has announced the agenda items for today. Among them, as he indicated to me late yesterday, that the Zozo extension and the state of emergency extension would be taken today. I did indicate that it is unfortunate and unacceptable that these two matters, which have before now at all the sessions when we are considering them and approving them, we have insisted firstly on certain information, but more importantly on the timeliness of the notice to the opposition, especially, Mr. Speaker, in relation to the state of emergency. This requires a 2/3 majority of our Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, just allow me to finish this point. Will you please allow me to finish the point?
You are a very seasoned Parliament.
Yes, but if you'll allow me to finish the point.
You are
Mr. Speaker,
on a ground where you are debating an item.
Yes. Can I just finish the point?
That is going to require somebody to answer. I would wish
Can I just finish the point?
wait till you reach the item, then you proceed.
Mr. Speaker, to finish the point, it requires a 2/3 majority. It therefore means that we have to consult. We can't just assume that the members on this side, without notice, will come here without our own internal consultation to approve this extension. So it is unacceptable, and I'm giving notice today, Mr. Speaker, that the opposition will not be participating in those debates today.
Mr. Montague.
Mr. Speaker, did I hear correctly?
Sorry, Mr. Mark. Go ahead.
He will not be participating in those debates. May I ask the member, is it the intention of the opposition to vote on the matter today?
Can you sit? Mr. Speaker, by non-participation, it means that we will not be taking part in the vote today. I think there is sufficient time for us to contemplate these matters next week. We should give the opposition enough time to consider our position, for the government to share certain information. We have always required updates. We need to know what are the performances in both the zones and also the state of emergency. There are critical data that we exchange from time to time. We have not received any updates. We can't go into these debates with our hands tied behind us, and we will not, Mr. Speaker, with the greatest of respect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I begin my statement, let me also join with the other members of the House in expressing my condolences to the Douglas family, as well as to young Miquelle Phillips, and to say to him, having lost a mother myself, that it is often said that children become adults at the passing of your mother. But how many of us would wish to continue to be children and keep our mother? Mr. Speaker, let me also extend congratulations to 3 members of the House who have been elevated recently to positions of high responsibility. And I am, Mr. Speaker, quite pleased that 2 of the members actually shadow the portfolio that I have responsibility for. I'm being nice. And I want to especially congratulate the member from Northwest Manchester, as well as the member from East Kingston and Port Royal. Let me also congratulate the member from Western Westmoreland. But when we achieve these milestones, it is good to offer congratulations. Mr. Speaker, this Honourable House will recall that nearly 2 years ago, New Day Data Holdings LLC was identified as the preferred bidder for the purchase of the Gramercy Alumina Refinery in Louisiana and 49% stake in the Noranda Jamaica Bauxite Partnership in St. Anne, Jamaica. This government then entered into an agreement with New Day, which sought to protect the interests of the government and the people of Jamaica while considering the best options for all parties involved. As a result, over 300 jobs were saved and all monies owing to workers are being paid. The partnership agreement with New Day prevented any disruption of Noranda bauxite operations. In October 2016, a letter of intent was signed between the government of Jamaica and New Day Holdings. Thereafter, the innovation agreement and the various implementing documents, such as the establishment agreement and the joint venture partnership and mining agreements, among others, were to be completed and signed by November 30, 2016. Regrettably, Mr. Speaker, that process was delayed. The deadline for concluding the innovation agreement was initially extended beyond November 30, 2016, in order to facilitate the equitable treatment of employees on a uniform basis. The extended delay thereafter was due to several factors, including revisions of the commitments originally made in the letter of intent, discussions on the boundaries of the cockpit country, and a frost event in Louisiana, which caused the pipes at the Gramercy refinery to burst, thereby delaying certain activities. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that on September 6, 2018, the government of Jamaica and New Day signed the novation agreement. This agreement outlines the parameters, commitments, and business arrangements between the government of Jamaica and New Day as partners in the bauxite operation in St. Ann. Steps have been taken to guarantee that this country is protected, even as we seek to benefit from the natural resources as a driver of our economy. These operations are conducted to ensure that the natural environment is properly managed for sustainability. It must be noted that the agreement not only covers mining operations in Jamaica, but extends to the refinery in Gramercy, in Louisiana, United States. Mr. Speaker, I once again put on record that the government remains committed to ensuring that the people of Jamaica, who we serve, always remain our first and most important priority. The government of Jamaica entered into a profit-sharing arrangement where both partners benefit from a financial recovery in the performance of the mining and refining operations of the entity. We believe that this new arrangement will earn the country more in US dollars compared to the traditional levy system. Under the agreement, the government will earn 17.33% earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, or US $1.50 per ton of dried bauxite shipped, whichever is greater. The royalty payments of US 50 cents per dry metric ton of ore shipped will also remain in effect. At the signing, New Day paid to the government of Jamaica US $7 million, approximately 959 million Jamaican dollars. This represents a significant part of the US 17 million or 2.2 billion Jamaican dollars owed, the rest of which is to be paid over a 36-month period. These represent legacy payments as well as royalties. The government will continue to insist that when we are owed that these payments are quickly settled. The bauxite belongs to the people of Jamaica. Therefore, if the company makes no profit, then the levy on the bauxite must be paid. Although not a part of the novation agreement, the government team requested that the outstanding land titling for persons who have been resettled be dealt with. As of June 2018, there are 1,140 titles outstanding, and we will continue to work with the company to have this matter settled. Mr. Speaker, this government was tasked with the responsibility to securing the monies owed by Noranda to the people of Jamaica, to protect the jobs of the employees and to ensure the continuation of bauxite operation. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we have accomplished the task. I must give credit to the former Minister, Honourable Mike Henry, who initially led these discussions, as well as to the technocrats at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the Jamaica Bauxite Institute, the Jamaica Bauxite Mining Company Limited, and the Attorney General's Chambers, who all work tirelessly to protect the interests of the people of Jamaica, and, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we got a very good deal for all parties. Mr. Speaker, this is a new day. We are on a new trail, and this government will continue along this path of environmental sustainability and prosperity. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I acknowledge the statement that the Minister has just read, and I am anticipating, especially in relation to some of the questions that I'm about to raise, that the level of opaqueness that I've become accustomed to in the questions to this matter, that will dissipate, and that we can see some more transparency in the answers. Mr. Speaker, this is an absolutely bad deal for Jamaica. This is a bad deal for Jamaica. And this represents a dark day for us in the bauxite industry. Have regard to the struggles that we have gone through. I remember in the 50s, before I was born, the late so excellent Norman Manley, tried his best to enable us to maximize the earnings then. And then in the 70s, when the bauxite levy was imposed. And to see where we are at today. Mr. Speaker, I will announce that I today will be writing to the chairman of the PAAC, because I think this matter requires some probing of the Ministry of Energy, and I'll explain why. The Ministry of Mining, Transport and Mining. I'll explain why, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the latest deal that I have seen announced in the papers guarantees an amount of 5.2 million tons of bauxite per annum. And let us just look at that figure as we contemplate what this country is giving up in terms of the levy. Mr. Speaker, we have struggled with this industry, you know. When I became minister in 2012, we were at the pit, literally and figuratively, pun intended, in terms of the industry. We were at our lowest ebb. But it was clear to us that having done certain things and having watched the trend, that this industry was going to rebound. And by 2015, we were seeing those clear signs. So, Mr. Speaker, let's just look at that figure. In 2016, the bauxite levy would have been about $6 per ton. By 2017, that same levy had risen to $7.50 per ton based on the market, based on the LME. This year, 2018, the levy is at $8 per ton. So let us just calculate now. Using that same base of 5.2 million tons. In 2018, you multiply that by 8, the country would be earning $41.6 million US dollars.
Wow. And they've given it up.
Well, let me tell you what has happened since this deal, so-called deal, has come into place. Firstly, we acknowledge the legacy payments, and nobody is doing us a favor. We went and struggled and won an arbitration in the UK, quite rightly, and the company was ordered to pay this amount. Our frustration is that it has taken us too long, 3 more years, to get to the full payment. So nobody's doing us a favor in that regard. But also, Mr. Speaker, monies were owed to the workers and to other suppliers. I'd like the Minister to indicate what of those outstanding amounts to workers and to the suppliers. But let me just do the calculation, because the former minister announced that the new deal would realize $1.50 per ton on the bauxite, or 17.33% share of profit. Mr. Speaker, to now I can't tell you what profits are we talking about, which entity will the profits be derived? Is it the company that is doing the aluminum process and sale, or the company doing the alumina process and sale? And we are still shrouded.
Which one of the subsidiaries?
So, right. So we want to know which of the subsidiaries. Because we had warned, Mr. Speaker, that we won't be able to realize anything much because of our history in this area of profit sharing. I have done some calculations. I have been told, and the minister can answer this, that to date you have realized on the $1.50 per ton, 8.25 million, plus there has been a payment of $5 billion US. I'm not too sure that is correct, but if that is so, million US, the total will be 13.25 million US dollars. If we were abiding by the bauxite levy over the period from the end of 2016 to now, when the rates move up to $8, I'm giving the government the benefit of the doubt. I'm using $7 as the average. That amount that would get is $38.5 million, 25.25 million US more, or 3.4 billion Jamaican dollars more, Mr. Speaker. $3.4 billion. You know what we could do with $3.4 billion in this country? This is a bad deal. This is a bad deal. And I really want the PAAC to examine this deal. And there was no reason for it. Our bauxite today is a price commodity because of where the market is. There's no need to sell ourselves short at this time. That was in 2008. We fought back since 2012, and we left in 2016 an industry that was teeming for success and prosperity. And prosperity. So, Mr. Speaker, this, I want to see that contract. I want us to examine those persons who were involved in this negotiation to see why we would accept this. Mr. Speaker, there's another matter that I'd like to raise because the Minister raised it in his submission, in his presentation, the matter of the cockpit country. And the Prime Minister, I have to look at you squarely now because I believe the country was put into a PR charade when you made an announcement in this Parliament preceded by a petition that seemed to have been sponsored by Jamaica House, where persons signed up to speak about no bauxite mining in the cockpit country. And I said to you at the time, Mr. Prime Minister, why are you now announcing today then that there will be no more mining in the cockpit country when you are far from resolving the issue of the cockpit country? I warned at the time that the only way you can come here and declare that there is no such mining is if you came with an order banning mining, and you never did that. And I'm seeing the Minister in his statement in the Observer has given reserves. I hear it's 12 times the amount of reserves that the company had before Naranda. And I can't tell where, and they're not refining. The aim, Prime Minister, wasn't for us to be giving away our bauxite. The aim was to add value in Jamaica. That was the aim. And to date, we don't know where is this cockpit country. To date, based on the expansion that has been given to this company, that for me, run the risk, and I'll put it at that for the time being, of invading those parts of the cockpit country that I thought the Prime Minister was clear about, that there wouldn't be any mining. Whoa. And so, Prime Minister, I really would love for this Parliament. We are giving away much more to earn less. We are giving away the reserves. We are giving away the patrimony of this country, of our people. Mr. Speaker, the bauxite levy supposed to contribute to the development of our communities. There has been a long-standing community development fund where members of Parliament, where communities that exist within bauxite communities benefit from these allocations, improvements in infrastructure, etc., etc., etc. by diminishing in a calculated way, because it is now government policy to allow the companies to operate without the payment of a bauxite levy. And now Euroton, for example, they don't pay anything today. It means we are giving away this depleting resource of our country to companies, to companies that can afford to pay, now that the industry is at its perhaps highest in 30 years, at its peak in 30 years. Mr. Speaker, I say shame, shame, shame on this government.
Mr. Speaker, I sat there in disbelief, absolute disbelief, when I heard the member pontificating. But let us ask him if he can remind us that having taken the matter to arbitration, and did very well, if the letter of credit from Noranda was allowed to expire, and why? We are majority owners of the plant, and we had to negotiate with a new buyer. And, Mr. Speaker, the payments to the workers, I said in my statement, has been dealt with. I said that. Mr. Speaker, I went on to state clearly that the profit sharing of 17.33% was before taxes, debt repayment, and other items. We also went on in the statement to clearly indicate that the profits would come from both the plant here in St. Anne and the plant in Louisiana. We also was very clear that if there was no profit, the bauxite levy would become due. Mr. Speaker.
Point of clarification, Mr. Speaker. The minister speaks about the bauxite levy becoming due. What are you speaking about? It's the $1.50, which is not the bauxite levy, because the bauxite levy today is $8. So what payment are you speaking of?
The $1.50 per dry ton, $1.50 US, plus the royalty payments, which exist in any event. So when I hear the member screaming and shouting and whispering about prosperity, that was the only thing I was pleased about. But the member also forgot to tell us that while he was minister, he wasn't collecting bauxite levy from other companies either. But to describe this deal as shameful, it is regrettable. And Mr. Speaker, the technocrats worked hard on this deal. The lawyers worked hard on this deal, and the deal is for the benefit of all of us. And Mr. Speaker, I commend the agreement to the House.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the Minister a question. And the question is simply this: is the government abandoning the bauxite levy regime in relation to the mining that is taking place at New Day. And what are the reasons, if the answer is yes, what are the reasons for the abandonment of the bauxite levy regime? I'd like, Mr. Speaker, to remind the Minister and the Honourable House of the background to the levy regime. Jamaica had gone this way before. Companies, we discovered, were able, in their own internal accounting arrangements, to disguise or move profits at will between different subsidiaries. It is to the credit of the negotiating team of that period, and subsequently, which included Honourable Maya Matalan, Honourable Pat Rousseau, Honourable Dr. Vin Lawrence, Honourable Hugh Hart at a later point, all who recognized that the only way for us to get a secure portion of the earnings was to link Jamaica's earnings to the world price for aluminium. That means whatever was happening, there was a transparent and acceptable measure as to what was due to us. We on this side had no objection in 2008 when the alumina prices plunged because of the Great Depression, Great Recession that took place. There was an agreement that we would forego it and that at a certain trigger point we would increase the levy. At the point in 2014, I believe, 2015, we were getting 50% of the levy due, and there was a discussion about what was due after that point, which is what we went to arbitration about, and we won it. Now, what is the justification when world aluminium prices are at a peak level for Jamaica to give up this levy? All of you, every minister of government, including the Prime Minister, can speak volumes about the needs in your respective constituencies and communities. All of us have them. Roads to be built, schools to be repaired, water supplies to be improved, hospitals in need of equipment. Everyone, what reason under God's heaven can we give, Mr. Minister? What reason under God's heaven can we give for giving up those earnings at this point in time? Don't tell me about New Day and Miranda. There are other companies operating in Jamaica who would have accepted those supplies, wanted more reserves. There's no reason whatever. I plead with you, Prime Minister, re-examine the deal. Don't do it. There's no basis to give up the patrimony of the Jamaican people. No.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am quite pleased with the statement by the Leader of the Opposition, because he has enunciated the needs of all of us in our constituencies. And it is because the industry is buoyant, that is why when we share in the profits, we will earn more to take care of the needs of all of us in our various constituencies.
Mr. Paulwell, 1 minute, 1 minute. Dr. Phillips.
Mr.
Dr.
Speaker,
Phillips.
no.
Please, Dr. Phillips.
The minister asked the specific question. Is it the intention to give up the levy
regime
and abandon
remains.
the levy
regime remains.
Mr. Speaker.
Montague. Minister Montague. Mr. Paulwell, have a seat, please. Minister Montague.
Yes, sir.
I wish that we don't have so much controversy on the first day. I wish that members will turn to Standing Order page 7 and look at statements by minister and how you can ask a question without statements. When a question is asked, Mr. Minister, with due respect, you answer the question. Please do not go beyond your statement of minister. So that I don't have to turn, a question shall not be asked without notice of motion. I don't have to have any controversy today because questions will not be debated in the House from statement from minister. You're going to bring a resolution for that debate. I'm going to ask Mr. Paulwell to ask, because in his position as the person appointed by the opposition, you have before you what you can do, and you have done it already. And I beg you, Mr. Paulwell, do not turn a statement by a minister into a debate. The standing order state clearly. The standing order state clearly. And Mr. Twait, you could look beyond me. I'm telling you, turn to the standing order if you don't have it. Yes, yes. I am seeing you and hearing you. So your Monsignor type of surprise, I'm interpreting. Anyhow,
Mr.
please.
Speaker, the Prime Minister would like to start as soon as possible.
Yes, but we have to finish. I hear you. 1 minute, Mr. Paulwell, please. 1 minute, Mr. Paulwell. I heard the leader of government business. But I'm going to ask Mr. Paulwell, who has used up more than his 5 minutes already, according to the standing order. A response by Minister not exceed 5 minutes. And you have gone 11 so far. And you want to ask a further question?
Mr. Speaker, I have made my statement in response. I now wish to ask some questions, as I'm entitled to.
Go ahead, Mr. Paulwell.
Yes. Mr. Minister, I'm answering a question.
Order, please. Go ahead, Mr. Paulwell.
Mr. Minister, how much have we earned in profits since 2016 and the start of this deal? And from what company or companies we have earned in that profit? First question.
Minister Montague, a question is asked.
Mr. Speaker, if I don't know the answer to that question, I can't anticipate another question.
Mr. Montague, you are required by standing order to answer a question.
Mr. Speaker.
And that's it.
Mr. Speaker, the question so asked requires some amount of research.
Do not
continue, I do not wish to mislead the House.
So the government of Jamaica doesn't know now, the amount of money that we have earned. The second question, Mr. Speaker, how long, what is the duration of this agreement? And so in addition to that, the Minister will indicate also what are the new reserves and where are they located.
Mr. Speaker, I will revert to the member with the answers in writing.
Mr. Speaker, no, that is unacceptable. And for that reason, I tell you, I'm going to be writing to the chairman of the PAC because there's no reason why you can't give us the answer as to the duration of this contract. You were on TV recently speaking about it. No. I want to know the answer. I want to get the answer. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Minister, is the duration 25 years?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the members. No, his mic was on. I welcome the member's charge that he'll refer the matter to the PAAC. I too look forward to that and will provide all the information that is necessary.
Mr. Speaker, there is a deliberate question. Is the duration 25 years?
Mr. Speaker, I will do better than that. I will provide you with a copy of the agreement.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has promised this House a copy of the agreement. Can he state when I'll get a copy of this agreement?
As soon as possible, at the next sitting of the House.
Is there a signed copy of this agreement today?
Paulwell. Mr. Paulwell, you have asked the Minister. No, Mr. Paulwell, don't be unfair. You ask a question, you ask him and he has advised us.
Yes. The Minister has advised us.
He will give me when the House meets.
The Minister has advised.
I'm holding him to that.
The Minister has advised that there's a signed copy, there's a signed agreement. I am, as the opposition spokesman on mining, I wish to have a copy of that agreement, and I'm asking that can be made available to me today or tomorrow the latest.
Mr. Paulwell, you don't expect that the Minister is going to carry the agreement with him to Parliament. If the Minister promises to give you at the next sitting of Parliament, he has to live up to that.
Mr. Speaker, this matter is so urgent that I don't believe that the people's business should await a week duration. I am insisting that I get a copy of the contract tomorrow, Minister. I am insisting on that.
Mr. Semudo.
No, Mr. Speaker. You're going along with the agenda, Mr. Speaker, as was originally outlined. So the
announcements.
Yes.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following Ministry Paper number 74 through 81 of 2018, entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues, dated June 4, 11, 18 and 25, and July 2, 9, 16 and 30. Ministry Paper number 82 of 2018, Annual Reports of Planning Institute of Jamaica for the years ended March 31, 2016 and March 31, 2017. Ministry Paper number 83, Annual Report of the Casino Gaming Commission for the year 2016-2017. Ministry Paper number 84 of 2018, and Annual Report on Audited Financial Statements of the Financial Services Commission for the year 2016-2017. Ministry Paper number 85 of 2018, entitled The National Seed Policy and Action Plan. Ministry Paper number 86, and Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Institute for National Development, MIND, for the year 2016-2017. Ministry Paper number 87, an Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Sugar Industry Authority for the year 2015-2016. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Kingston Free Zone Company Limited for the year 2016-2017. Annual Report of the Development Bank of the Jamaica Limited for the year 2016-2017. Auditor General's Performance Audit Report on the Students' Loan Bureau. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Montego Bay Free Zone Company Limited for the year 2016-2017. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Sports Development Foundation for the years 2014 and 2015. Performance Audit Report of the Jamaicas for Implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Professional Engineers Registration Board for the year 2016-2017. First report of the National Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, 2018. Law Reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Number 5 Order, 2018, and the Law Reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Number 5 Order, 2018, under the Law Reform, Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017. The Emergency Powers Number 2 Continuance Number 3 Resolution 2018 under the Emergency Powers Act. Certified Appropriation Accounts, Ministry of Local Government and Community Development, 7200A and B for 2014, 2015 and 2015-2016 respectively. Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries for 2013-14, Head 100A and Head 100B. Sorry, that should be 5100A and 5100B. Ministry of Youth and Culture, 4500B, 2014-2015, and the Revenue Court, Head 2828, for 2012-13, 2013-14, 2014-15, and 2016-17. Annual Report of the Maritime Authority of Jamaica for 2016-2017. Annual Report of the Toll Authority for financial year 2016-2017.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following two motions. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation Number 5 Order 2018, and the Emergency Powers Number 2 Continuance Number 3 Resolution 2018. I'll start with the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operations Number 5 Order Resolution 2018. Whereas Section 4 of the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Prime Minister and Council may, by order, declare any geographically defined area within a continuous single boundary in Jamaica as a zone of special operations for a period not exceeding 60 days if there are reasonable grounds to believe that due to rampant criminality, gang warfare, escalating violence and murder, and the threat to the rule of law and public order, it is necessary so to do. And whereas, in accordance with that section, the Prime Minister in Council made the Law Reform Zone of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Declaration of the Denham Town Community Zones, number 2, Order 2017, and whereas that order provides that the said zone shall operate for a period of 60 days, and whereas Section 5 of the Act provides that the Prime Minister in Council, after consultation with the Joint Command, may by order confirm, may by order, subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, extend the said period for such further periods, each not exceeding 60 days. And whereas on the 18th day of September 2018, the Prime Minister in Council made the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension Period of Operations number 5, Order 2018, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operations number 5, Order Resolution 2018, and 2, the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone, Extension of Period of Operation number 5, Order 2018, is hereby affirmed. The second resolution, Mr. Speaker, the Emergency Powers number 2, Continuance number 3, Resolution 2018. Whereas by virtue of Section 21 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor-General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 18th day of March 2018, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the areas of the parish of St. Catherine specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 23 of the Constitution of Jamaica that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas under the provisions of Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency by order to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred on him by Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers number 2 Regulations 2018 for securing the essentials of life to the specified areas in the parish of St. Catherine during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3(4) of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulation so made shall be laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2018 were laid in the House of Representatives on the 27th day of March 2018 and in the Senate on the 29th day of March 2018, and whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency declared as aforesaid and the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations remain and continue in force until the 3rd day of July 2018, and whereas it was thereafter resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency declared as aforesaid and the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations remain and continue in force for a period of 3 months until the 2nd day of October 2018. And whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned should remain in force for a further period of 3 months until the 2nd day of January 2019, and B, the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulation 2018 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers No. 2 Continuance No. 3 Resolution 2018, and 2. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor General by proclamation on the 18th day of March 2018 shall remain in force for a further period of 3 months until the 2nd day of January 2019. And 3, the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2018 are hereby continued in force until the 2nd day of January 2019. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give further notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Questions and answers to questions. Mr. Bunting.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the expiration of 21 days, I will ask the Minister of Finance the following question standing in my name. And I also give notice that at the expiration of 21 days, I'll ask the Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation the following question. Mr. Speaker, while I'm on my feet, could I just use this opportunity to ask for an update on question 17 standing in my name, which was due from the 31st day of July for the Prime Minister to answer on the matter of the Memorandum of Understanding between the UDC and the China Construction America, South America Company.
That, member, the latter part of your contribution, that will be answered next week. That's an undertaking. That is the one in respect of the one that's addressed to the Prime Minister. Yeah.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business. Leader of the House.
As indicated earlier, the Minister of Transport will deal with the Transport Authority Validation and Indemnity Act 2018. However, I'm going to ask that we take first the Prime Minister to deal with the Law Reform Zone of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Denham Town Community Zone Extension of Period of Operations number 5 order 2018. Deal with that first, and then thereafter, right immediately after, the Emergency Powers number 2, Continuance number 3, Resolution 2018.
Thank you.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I go into the presentation, just to respond to the Leader of Opposition Business with the request for time to prepare their response to the request for the extension of the state of emergency in North St. Catherine and the zones of special operation in Denham Town. The member wasn't clear if it was both or just the state of emergency.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the suggestion was in relation to both, and perhaps the Prime Minister could remind us about when does the ZOZO expire in Denham Town.
In Denham Town, the zone of special operation would expire, I believe, the 16th of October, thereabouts. And the state of emergency would expire on the 2nd. The challenge, member, is that the United Nations General Assembly starts next week. And so we thought it would be opportune to take these two, which are closer now. We can well understand the point you have made about requiring time for more analysis. On the zones of special operations, it is a fairly routine matter. And I would urge you and the members on that side to facilitate the passage of the zone. On the state of emergency, I would be prepared to have a sitting this week before I leave.
Mr. Phillips.
Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister, we can well understand the exigencies of travel and prime ministerial responsibility that will take you overseas, although I believe even with your absence, we would have a sufficient number of persons in the House. There are two issues that arise. First of all, just simply the adequacy of notice about a debate on a matter as weighty as this. While it is true that we have been passing successively, we consider it important that we should give careful consideration to the powers that we are conferring on the authorities in this regard. And I want to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, in doing this, we're not seeking to frustrate, we're seeking to inform ourselves about what we are doing. But it is really not adequate. I mean, we were told yesterday evening that it is proposed to debate it today. That's less than 24 hours notice. It's just simply not acceptable in this way. And so what I would urge, if possible, we could do both next week. There's enough time. I mean, and quite frankly, I don't think this zone of special operations is going to be controversial. But certainly we could debate, and I'm certain if it's your usual pattern, your Minister of National Security may unless he's traveling to New York too, could properly acquit himself. Is that the right use of the word? Not that you are under indictment, but discharge the responsibilities. And we considered, with that notice, we have been able, not all the members on either side are here to vote and to guarantee the number that would be needed. So I would urge, for good order, that we don't proceed in that way. If you wanted to start the debate, no, but we're not we are not ready. We are not ready on the state of emergency. I mean, I don't know on either.
Mr. Speaker, I am not one to in any way try to not utilize parliamentary time as efficiently as possible. I see that we have sufficient members in the House. The members here elected are members who have, I think, the extraordinary capacity and are always connected and in tune. I take the point that, yes, I mean, you have to be representatives of the people. But I take the point that insofar as you operate as a collective, you want time to review data. And I can see specifically for the state of emergency, as I've always had that posture that when asked, I would be inclined to give the time. The challenge, however, is that for the state of public emergency and the zones of special operations, no, I think we could easily close the zones. It's fairly routine. There's nothing that's new in the zones of special operation, as is the case with the state of emergency. So the part that I'm proposing, Mr. Speaker, is I will proceed with the debate. I think we can easily vote on the extension of the zones of special operations. And we encourage the members to consider, as the debate evolves, whether or not they would make the decision. If they are not willing to make the decision, then we could call a special sitting tomorrow to have it done. Or Thursday. Oh, sorry, the funeral is on Thursday. We could do it tomorrow. We have to use parliamentary time more efficiently. Mr. Speaker, the existing realities of crime and violence have led us once again to request further extensions of the enhanced security measures for two important areas in Jamaica. These interventions have proven themselves. The decline in the national murder rate is now 21% as at the 16th of September 28. 21%. And no, well, we're coming to East Kingston, and I think you should support what we're doing. And Mr. Speaker, in the communities that have been directly impacted, the experience has been positive largely, and the measures continue to be welcomed. We must therefore continue to support the security forces and reinforce these strategies. Failure to do so will disappoint the expectations of law-abiding citizens to the advantage of the criminals. Mr. Speaker, the criminals have demonstrated the extreme lengths that they will take against the defenseless. They have demonstrated strong resolve in exploiting the vulnerable at whatever cost. Mr. Speaker, the recent attacks on the children of this country is but one example of the direct threat that the criminals pose, not just to the weak and vulnerable, but directly to the future potential of this country. Our children, Mr. Speaker, should not be robbed of their innocence, and certainly they should not be robbed of their lives. It is always heart-wrenching to have to sit with a parent or with parents who have lost their children due to violence. Twice I've had to do so, and the Member of Parliament from South St. Andrew would have had to do so on the same occasion. It is quite tragic that this is happening. It is really a bad reflection on our society. But it is all the more reason why we must have the resolve to address the crime problem. Our resolve, Mr. Speaker, must therefore be greater than the resolve of the criminals. And we must demonstrate the resolve to take extraordinary measures in these abnormal circumstances. And we must show as a collective, as a parliament, that we have the stamina to sustain the measures that have been working. Mr. Speaker, this Honourable House of Parliament and the people in it are the recognized authority. We are the most effective line of defense against the threats posed by the criminals, and we must continue to protect the people of this country in the discharge of our duties. Mr. Speaker, acting on the advice of the National Security Council and in accordance with the law reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act, I must therefore again ask this Honourable House for its support for the extension of the Zones of Special Operation in Denham Town. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, I'm also bringing the Emergency Powers Number 2, Continuance Number 3 Resolution 2018 to this Honourable House to vote on having the state of public emergency in the specified areas of St. Catherine remain in force for a 3-month period following the expiration of the current period. Mr. Speaker, it must be underscored that these special measures have been duly considered and assessed, and our joint support will undoubtedly encourage a long-lasting and positive outcome further to the gains that have already been achieved. Mr. Speaker, as is the case, I will give a brief overview of the social intervention that is being done in Denham Town. By way of update, Mr. Speaker, last time I announced a zinc removal project. My understanding now, Mr. Speaker, is that the project is largely complete and there are areas in which it is still ongoing. It has been of great effect in uplifting the community. Mr. Speaker, significant work continues in the support for education. And during the summer period, several programs were put in place, including summer camps, retreats, and various activities to get our students ready for school. Mr. Speaker, there is now a program in place to support capacity building for community organizations, particularly youth organizations, where youth clubs, police youth clubs, youth groups can apply for a grant to build their capacity, acquire equipment, and so forth for up to $1 million. Mr. Speaker, I just signed recently a program for $184 million through JSIF to further the infrastructure upgrade in the community. That will go to Cabinet shortly, and Shortly thereafter, that program will begin, which will include physical landscaping, patching roads, sewage, both installation and correction of sewage problems, and improving the water system in the area. This, Mr. Speaker, will impact over 8,000 residents of the area, and we expect work to commence quickly. Yes, and of course it is not just, in fact, we've signed 2, so it's not just Denham Town. It's a broad area, but the zone, I'm just mentioning what we're doing in the zone. Mr. Speaker, yeah. Mr. Speaker, the interventions continue in all aspects of the community, including health, including parenting, and importantly, Mr. Speaker, civil registration. I think by now, Mr. Speaker, we can safely say that close to 80% of the adults in the zone would have now reached the point where they have at least one form of identification. So it continues. The Joint Command of the Zone of Special Operations, Mr. Speaker, they have been tasked to constantly review their operations to ensure that there is no complacency setting in. And I'm happy to say, Mr. Speaker, that the operations itself, the integrity of the operation remains, and that the residents are very happy with the operations and don't want it to be ended at all. And that, Mr. Speaker, is the ultimate test of whether or not the program is working. When the residents say, don't leave, don't leave. And they are saying they want it to stay. Ultimately, however, Mr. Speaker, ultimately, you want the community to evolve to a point where they say, all right, you know what, we're good right here, so now go and help somebody else. And that is what we're working towards, for the people to own their peace. That does not happen overnight, but it is happening. The wants are insatiable, but there is a point. There comes a point, Mr. Speaker, where we can report success. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to St. Catherine North.
Well, first of all, a matter of procedure, because a motion would have to have been carried for us to join the debate on the 2 motions. I don't recall it having been done. But I don't know how we could then begin the debate on the state of emergency if we are going to, let's do it as a separate debate on that, so that, because we're not going to vote on the state of emergency today, or we are unable to. But on Zozo, we can proceed.
Mr. Speaker, at the outset of reading into the records at notices of motions, I indicated that I would be doing both. I indicated that I would take both motions. At the start of my presentation, I indicated again that I'm taking, but just to be clear, my proceeding with the 2 debates would only pose a problem if they were being voted on together. So I'm proceeding, doing my part with my debates, bearing in mind that I may not be in Parliament. Well, definitely. So I'm moving ahead. At the point of when we have to vote on either or both, then if your decision is that you're not voting, then so be it. Yes, we'll seek the necessary suspension to take them separately. So Mr. Speaker, so I will move on to making my opening presentation on the state of
What I would want, if you will forgive me, what I would need if we were doing that, in other words, a person participating in the Zozo debate would not be denied their participation under the standing orders in the other
Speaker,
debate.
for good order then, Mr. Speaker, I would rest and put the Zozo.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission.
Mr. Jackson, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Now that the matter has been cleared, as for the state of the Zozo, zones of special operation, indeed, Mr. Speaker, as was indicated by the House, the leader of opposition business and the leader of the opposition, it would make for good order that for matters of security, for which we would want the Parliament to at all times speak in one voice, that there be a better cooperation with the opposition. I must reiterate the point, Mr. Speaker. To have been told yesterday that we are convening today, the House, and more so, to debate a matter of such magnitude. Bear in mind, Mr. Speaker, that the expiration is not tomorrow. The expiration of the Zozo is over 3 weeks down the road. So there is ample time beyond now. And given the fact that the date of expiration was never a secret, the date of, I know the Prime Minister have obligations of travel, but given the importance of the matter and his desire to participate in it and to have the opposition, a week or two before we could have been notified. One, and I must reiterate, Mr. Speaker, we have repeatedly plead, literally beg of the government to share some information with us on what transpires in terms of performance, both the state of Zozo and in the state of emergency, to inform our position as responsible members of Parliament when we go to our respective constituencies and to defend the decisions that we participate in here. We must have some credible basis of being able to defend it. What is so unreasonable about that? And that's what we ask for. So our position is that whether or not we support it or not, we need a basis on which to take a position one way or the other. So I'm making that plea again, Mr. Speaker. In respect of this, the zones of special operation, yes, the Prime Minister has indicated it is virtually non-controversial at this time. And personally, and for those who I consult with, I've not heard of any egregious issues arising in Denham town that would cause us to say not continue. But, Mr. Speaker, every policy implementation, not just the opposition, but in fact the country, needs to have an appreciation of what is happening, the basis on which it's happening, so we can assess, even in other areas, what we ought to do or ought not to do. So the opposition offers no objection to the motion in respect to the Denham Town zones of special operation.
Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I speak on the motion currently being debated, which I understand to be the motion to extend the period of the zone of special operations in Denham Town. And I just want to start by saying that I am very happy for the people of Denham Town that they are enjoying the benefits of the intensified concentration of assets and resources in their community that the ZOSO brings. And indeed, we heard fairly recently after a shooting incident, I think it was in Granville, St. James, which is part or under a state of emergency, the somewhat peculiar call from residents that they want a ZOSO in that community. And the reason is, of course, that the ZOSO is now kind of seen as synonymous with care and attention from the agencies of the state towards social deprivation that is prevalent in these communities. Speaking for myself, I would not grudge my neighbors in Denham town these benefits. I would just very much like to see them extended to the surrounding communities that are suffering from similar social deprivation. Whether it be matters relating to sewage, whether it be matters relating to identification of individuals through birth certificates and so on, whether it be street lighting. These are major issues affecting the security of residents in these types of communities. The Prime Minister spoke of 2 incidents, which he and I both had to share the aftermath of, involving young school-age girls who were murdered, a year apart, essentially. And in this most recent one, street lighting played a major role in the fact that the community where it took place is in darkness. There are no street lights around that community, and the residents have been asking for it. I have written for it. Most recently, I've reached out to my neighboring colleague, and I'm seeking his support, because street lighting is a critical element of security. And I think that communities uptown enjoy street lighting routinely. Communities in these parts of Kingston where there are real security issues are deprived of street lighting. And it is wrong. It's a part of the elitist mentality of the society that garbage disposal and street lighting and so on in these communities are not routine, are things that are often not present, or are late or tardy. The resources available for collection of garbage are often insufficient in these communities, whereas in the more salubrious communities on the hills, these are not issues. And I think the time has come where we need to extend the kind of intensive care that we see on the ZOSO to surrounding communities that have the very same problems. It is most unfair that resources be deployed solely in a small area, which are equally needed in equal measure in areas near those areas, around those areas. People interact. Nowadays, the days of political division are long gone. Residents move freely across the political divides, thank God, and they see what's happening there, and they say to themselves, well, why can't we get some of this too? So my call really is to ask for ZOSO-type intensive care. I'm not talking about necessarily the proliferation of security assets, so I'm going to speak a little bit on that too, but the social amenities side of it. I would like to see the street lighting, the garbage disposal, and the other amenities made available to the people of South St. Andrew, Southwest St. Andrew, other parts of West Kingston, Central Kingston, and so on. There's one issue though, and it's a national security issue that comes into play here, sir. And Mr. Speaker, it concerns the deployment of scarce national resources, national security resources. Now, in the Kingston West Division, where my constituency falls, and so does, I believe, most of the Minister of Local Government's constituency, I am told that the normal police personnel available to police the division has been reduced by, I think, when I heard it was 31 persons, because of the redeployment of personnel in the ZOSOs and I guess the other areas where there are enhanced security measures. The effect of this is, of course, that there aren't the same level of security personnel available to patrol and to respond to issues of security on the ground in the other parts of the Kingston West Division. And I think this is a problem, and it needs to be addressed. Because if we're going to be extending and extending with no clear idea of the criteria that would lead to the end of these enhanced security measures? What is the indicia, what is a milestone that would say, oh yes, we've passed that, so now we can restore normalcy and the normal broad allocation of available assets? If we don't know what that is, then we have to ask for it now. We have to say we need to have our areas adequately policed, or at least policed to the extent that they were before the ZOSOs began. So this is a point I want to reinforce this afternoon, that it is not acceptable to the people of the communities I represent that their security assets available to them are redeployed elsewhere while they are living without streetlights and with enhanced insecurity as a result of that situation. And this is a peculiarity that has been created by the concept of these very small localized zones of special operations. The way the law is drafted, Mr. Speaker, the zone could cover much broader areas. Indeed, it could cover most of Jamaica if it wanted. But the way it has been deployed is to have micro-communities targeted with intense reallocation of resources, financial and human, to those areas. And if it's temporary in time to have a shock and awe effect, fine. But when it becomes an extended, routinely and repeatedly renewed scenario, the other areas from where those resources are redeployed start to suffer. And we can't have that sufferation continuing indefinitely. So I really would call on the authorities and the government itself to speak to this issue as to when we are going to get back our normal levels of resources in the neighboring communities. And indeed, as I said earlier, to ask for some of the social intensive care that the lovely people of Denham town are enjoying. If that could be, spread the love a little more widely and let us all enjoy it, those who are suffering similar social deprivation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. McNeil. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Prime Minister, on each of these occasions I've spoken, and I'm finding it harder and harder. I'm struggling each time to ratify the motions for these extensions because of the problems that I'm facing in my constituency and by extension, Westmoreland. To start with, just to look at the murder figures, and in a general sense. Number one, the figures that I have, because as I said, we don't have all the figures. In 2015, it was 105 murders. 2016, 115. 2017, 147. We were up to Sunday, I think it was 100, but now I think we're at 104. We're about the same as last year. Our figures showed 5% up to Sunday, but with what has happened, we're down. But, Mr. Prime Minister, for the last few years, I've been talking about Westmoreland and the difficulties we have there. And I just want to read a short paragraph of something in one of today's papers. It says a 16-year-old student of Manning School in Savlamar, Westmoreland, was among 4 persons shot and killed as bloodthirsty gunmen went on a shooting spree in the Western Parish between late Sunday night and early yesterday morning. 5 other persons were shot and injured. That's today's paper. At the end, it says, since the start of the year, 104 persons have been murdered in Westmoreland, which has emerged as a new murder capital of the West. Mr. Prime Minister, each time we have had this discussion, I've come and I've asked for 4 things. The 4 things are increased personnel, security personnel, soldiers and police or more police, whatever it is. At the time when we had the problem in Grange Hill, the Minister of National Security came down and I made the point that we needed security personnel, not just there, but Savlamar, Negril, other areas. We need increased personnel. We need vehicles. We need operations. There are certain areas that need operations, specific operations, and I spoke to the Minister and the Superintendent in charge about these. And fourthly, we need social programs. Now, to date, as I stand here today, I can basically say we have gotten none of these.
up to this point in time. In terms of the personnel, the soldiers were brought in immediately in May, and within 3 weeks, they started to phase them out. And what we saw subsequent to that is that every now and then they will bring in a few, but for the most part, the soldiers are gone. In terms of the police, we're back to the deployment before, but like my colleague here, when I went to visit the police in Little London, where Constable Buckner was based, the constable that was shot and killed. When I went there, I looked around, I was saying how there were so few police. They have 10 police, 5 and 2 shifts. I think this is basically what I'm hearing. I don't know the specifics, but 5 are there in the day. What happened is 2 of them are deployed to Montpellier to man the site in Montpellier for the state of emergency. So what is happening? I'm left with 3. 1 is at the desk. You have no police personnel in an area that is now being termed as the murder capital of Jamaica, or whatever it is. In terms of the motor vehicles, when you look at it, we have gotten 3 motor vehicles over the last year. They're only replacing what we had. As a matter of fact, one of the problems we had is that the motor vehicle there had no reverse. For whatever, can't reverse. I mean, we laugh about it, but they have to. They have to drive into the primary school and come around to bring the vehicle around. That's crazy. You cannot say you're prioritizing something and not putting the resources into it. The operations that I spoke about, we've had a few, but certainly not what is necessary. And in terms of the social programs, Prime Minister, you had given me a guarantee. I'd gotten a call from the head of JSIF. They have had a meeting. 4 or 5 months later, May, what has happened is that we have had nothing. But here's what makes it worse. I want to tell you what makes it worse, Prime Minister. I determined that I was going to use my resources to get the social programs in. So I allocated resources to put the social programs, the school programs, sports programs, corner leagues, etc. To take it out of the political ambit, I formed a group with the pastors, the JPs, concerned citizens, with the SDC and the other agencies. The pastor who is running the program called me 2 weeks ago to say that we're running into a roadblock because for us to start the corner league, the police cannot guarantee the security of the corner league in the communities. So I can't start the social programs. So, Mr. Prime Minister, a lot of people turn, as they have done with my colleague, and they say, well, call for SOZO, call for the zone. I'll tell you, personally, my personal belief is I do not agree with the deprivation of the social rights of Jamaican people. I do not believe that we have to do that. And I'm concerned about the long-term effects of doing it. Therefore, my feeling is, what I would like for the people of Westmoreland is to ensure that they can get the increased security personnel, that they can get the vehicles that they require, that we can put in the social programs, that they can be instituted with the protection of the state. And I say this to you, Mr. Prime Minister, because today I am here, and as the leader of the opposition and the spokesman have said, we will support this. But I'm finding it harder and harder to support these extensions because the people whom I represent, I, Wicker McNeil, as a Member of Parliament for Western Westmoreland, I'm finding it difficult to support this situation when it is causing problems in my constituency and my parish. And I ask you, Prime Minister, I plead with you, please fulfill the promises made by yourself and the leader and the Minister of National Security. We would like to see the security forces beefed up. We want the police vehicles. We want the social programs. Westmoreland deserves to get these things. I plead with you, Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the outset of the Prime Minister's presentation, I did shout across, what about us in the East? And he did say, I will deal with that. So I was really anticipating something to be said, something be said about East Kingston and Port Royal, or the Eastern Division generally, because I have recently been in touch with the Minister of National Security. Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to reveal discussions or details on security matters. But I came away recently after spending some time with my local police people with a sense that they are entirely hapless in the situation that prevails in East Kingston and Port Royal. Hapless not because they are not professionals, not because they don't want to fight crime, even though I have found in one or two instances where police officers are now saying, well, I have families to go and deal with. But hapless because they are without adequate resources. You know, I got a call from a police officer recently when they were tied down in a period of sustained gunfire, and they had to leave the scene, and they couldn't find one of their radios, and somebody calling the MP to assist. Mr. Speaker, I want to address this matter because for too long we inside here pretend as if we can do all things to all men and women in relation to our responsibility. And sometimes even the police themselves, because they don't have the resources, seem to rely on us to assist. And I have learned a rough lesson, a hard lesson in my years in this business, because it's a no-win situation for the politician, but also I don't believe it's an appropriate response for the politician when you have so-called war in areas for the politician to go in and to try to bring some sort of peace, especially when that peace does not result in the extraction of persons who were involved in criminality, people who killed, murder. Sometimes in this process, you have the swapping out of cases, and it does leave in the end the remnants of unforgiveness and hate. I remember, and you know, when we speak about Zozo, I support Zozo in relation to some of the social interventions, because I believe that one of the major reasons for some of the high level of crime and violence has to do with social deprivation. But I want to ensure that when we do Zozo, we target those who are not criminals from becoming criminals. I think that ought to be the aim, because, you know, 15 years ago I learned a sad lesson. There was the so-called war. And when we went inside there to try to see how we can bring calm, because for me to have children having to run up and down when people firing shots when they should be in school is not something that I like. So when I went inside there, people were saying, well, we are unemployed, we need some things to do, we need work to do. And something happened that created some work, and there was a lull. But what I realized in that period, that lull was because resources were not available to buy shots. But as soon as the work was finished, people had money now to buy shots, and then the war resumed. And it's a never-ending, unending spiral that continues unabated. We have to get to the root of the problem, and that's why, Prime Minister, I really have to say to you that the response of the government in Zozo and state of emergency can't be your crime plan. It has to be much more than that. The officers in the Eastern Division are short on resources. They do not have enough police personnel to man and to support the activities in these crime-ridden areas. And they complain quietly that resources are elsewhere. And that's why even in contemplating my role here as a Member of Parliament to support the continuation of the state of emergency, I have to be thinking seriously whether or not my people are not as good as the rest of those communities that benefit from the sustained security presence. I have to, in the back of my mind, wonder about that. And it is very difficult for me to continue to see people being murdered, the communities in upheaval, without an adequate response from the state. I have said to people in my constituency now, I don't want a gunman to support me. I don't want any votes from gunmen. I want them to be locked up and dealt with. I don't want the state to be killing them either. I don't even support capital punishment. I don't. But you have to take them out of the community and try them. And when they are convicted, put them behind bars. And we have to have a police force that is capable of achieving that. And I believe that myself as a Member of Parliament can no longer assist in that regard. What I need to do is to assist the police in providing information. And my constituents know, and I don't bury my mouth when I talk, if I know that you are involved in wrongdoing, I am going to expose you. You could demonstrate against me till the kingdom come. I am going to ensure that there is calm in my community. But I don't want the police to go inside here to kill people. I want them to extract them so that they can be properly and truly prosecuted and convicted. So, Prime Minister, I am disappointed in what now prevails as the crime plan of the government, because I believe it leaves people like those in East Kingston and Port Royal outside of the contemplation of the state. And in that regard, the state will have failed them. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Has been indicated, we, I think, have no difficulty with the extension of the zone of special operations. And in fact, every time that it is brought here, I make an intervention. And I keep saying, when I hear you read out the accomplishments, that we have to reach a stage where you don't need a zone of special operation to have these kind of social interventions. And I think one of the ways in which we can achieve it is if we boost the Social Development Commission, we bring on more social workers for these inner city areas that can interface with parents, interface with the schools and the part beneficiaries and so on and so forth, and basically in the communities. I'm saying, the Prime Minister knows my position very well. You don't need a zone of special operation to have a summer camp. I have had a summer camp in my country for 26 years this year, supported by the Social Development Commission, supported by the CDF, supported by the police, the fire brigade, the 4-H clubs, the children agency, what's it called again, CDA, This was my 26 years. And that is why the churches, every church in Phillips, it goes around and around in various communities. Phillips High School hosted it this year. They intervened 300 kids, 12 to 18 years. They are registered for birth certificate. The RGD shouldn't be going to a community only when there's a zone of special operation. It is incumbent on us, that the RGD knows that their part of their mandate is to find people in the various communities and have them registered. We took the RGD to Phillips at the Yam Festival on the 27th of April. And they registered 298 kids and young adults and a few old people. They went to Crofts the following week. 300 and odd people come to get their birth certificate. I'm just saying, but after didn't have. And we are surprised. And this is not the first intervention we have made, you know. You find kids, this is not the first intervention we have made. But you find kids still without, and middle-aged people lost their birth certificate, never registered, coming in. I have to pay for it from a CDF. And RGD doesn't do it free. Don't do it free. And that is why I'm saying that you don't need Zozo to have this level of social intervention to make sure the sewage work. You don't need Zozo to make sure the sewage work. And especially these communities, we know, some of us who are involved in social work and have been out there with people all of our lives, that there are some inner city areas of Spanish Town and Kingston and St. Andrew that don't care what side of the fence they are, we must do the intervention in these areas, from Frog City to Denham Town to Backbush to wherever, because our agencies must go in and make sure that these people in the communities are attended to and their lives can be changed. I always support the concept of the Zozo from it was introduced, and I always been asking about the social component. I see it being rolled out little by little, JSIF and the road patching and the removal of zinc fence and so on and so forth. The teachers in those zones, the teachers, the schools, I'd ask the question, if the police has ever have a conference, a round table with all these teachers and so on, because sometimes we underestimate the impact of the teacher in a community, you know. We underestimate the impact. And sometimes they work and they are so tired that sometimes they want to give up. But they have never, a true teacher never gives up. And I'm telling you, we can use them, and we can boost the social army out there. We have to boost the STC. With STC hardly get capital expenditure. If we don't boost the STC and add more social workers to that organization, we're going to be in trouble. As the Zozo finish, things going back to normal. And I appeal to you, I appeal again to the government, try and conclude the negotiations with the police. Try and conclude it. Whatever it is, we can't have it drag out again. With Zozo and state of emergency and work and extension and whatever. Try and conclude. I beg the government, I appeal to you. But let's try and conclude the negotiations with the police. It has been too long.
Dr. Burke.
Well, thank you very much. Whenever we come to have a discussion on Zozo, I am pained. I am pained because I want to support the social intervention, which I believe all of those are important in terms of community building and community development. But like my colleague, I know that this kind of one-off division by division approach is one that does not sit well with me. And it does not sit well with me because I know the number of areas that desperately need that kind of intervention. And as the good Lord would have it, I have been sent here by the good people of Southwest St. Andrew. And so more than anything else, I have a first-hand experience of what's happening in some of our communities. I might have forgotten the experience when I was growing up, based on when I left Kingston, but certainly it is with me every day. I stepped out earlier because I wanted to make sure I completed a conversation with the officer in charge of Hunts Bay, because before I came here today, I was in the community discussing what has been happening for the last 3 or 4 days of gunshots being fired 2:30 every day for the last 2 days, and then yesterday evening the barrage of gunshots in the community, yes, in the middle of the rain. So the truth is that I don't begrudge Denham Town. No, I would want to see more being done. But I also would want to see similar activities and more being done in other communities, and certainly in areas of Southwest St. Andrew. I know that, for example, there are community leaders, community members who are coming together and saying, listen, we are tired of this nonsense. Let's send a message that we want all of those individuals involved in criminal activities out of our communities because we want safer communities. I know that that is so. There was one planned yesterday, and because of the rain, they put it off. So when that is held, I'll be there. Of course, up in York Avenue, the gunmen were not stopped by the rain. They were out in the pelting rain yesterday, at the heights of the rain. I know that the officers at Hunts Bay are doing everything that they can. I know that they are out there. But I also know that they're working in an extremely difficult space. I know the space is difficult, because for the portion of the space for which I am member of parliament, I know the reality is there. Even if I'm not as familiar in what is happening in South St. Andrew or what is happening in Western St. Andrew. But I know exactly what is happening. And so every time we have this discussion, I cannot come to the table without talking about these things and without making the appeal about the kinds of activities that we would certainly like to see. It was just, I think, a week and a half ago that a young 12-year-old was hit down and killed on Spanish Town Road because of the absence of street lights. Yes, there was indiscipline of the motorists. One person stopped to allow the young man to go across, and another one, not understanding what was happening with that darkness, overtook and hit him down, killed him on the spot. I know also of the spate of robberies in the communities of Spanish Town Road, again because of the lack of street lights. I'm painfully aware of that. I'm painfully aware of the issues surrounding the lack of water and what that means for individuals who have to get up early, before dusk, as they would say, to go out into the yard to catch water, afraid, in town, in Kingston, in the capital city of Jamaica, fearing at the same time the gunmen who are coming across the house next door or the yard next door or through the track, and the danger that poses. I am well aware. I am also aware that the officers, the police officers, just simply don't have sufficient resources. And of course, it is made even worse by the fact that that chaos that we have operating in that in the communities, that we have had to place additional security officers there to manage the traffic. So that has also taken away individuals that could have been giving service, protecting and serving the community. I am pleased that the suggestion that I had made is also on the table from the Prime Minister in terms of a bypass road. Pleased to see and hear that. But the truth is that we need additional boots on the ground. And we need the men and women of the Jamaica Constabulary force to feel comfortable while they leave their family and loved ones at home to put their lives on the line to protect us. Because in that same rain, where those gunmen came and pelted the community, fired at the community, there were officers out in the rain, braving it to see how they could render assistance. So we understand that. And if indeed we understand that, then we also have to talk up on their behalf, because we know that when individuals are not satisfied, they simply cannot give of their best, because they are only human. They are only human. So I want to say to the Prime Minister that for that area for which I am Member of Parliament, I too would like some programs where we can deal with the birth certificates, where we can have social intervention with more boots on the ground, where we can get additional street lights, where we can increase the programs for Hope and CAP and all of that, where water can be different, and where we can provide permanent employment opportunities. Because the member from East Kingston and Port Royal spoke a little while ago about the effect of temporary employment. But that's what happens when you have temporary employment. When you increase skills and provide an opportunity for permanent employment, individuals in the community require a safe space to operate. They require a safe space to spend their money. And so the way they see life and the activities in which they are involved, that changes. And that is really what we are working for. I also want to bring your attention, I heard the member from North Clarendon talking about summer camps. Even the very rules that we have introduced. For example, if your CDF, if your summer camps include CDF funds, you're asked now to provide insurance. It's easy for some persons. I contacted 9 different providers and could not find persons willing to insure, because of where I was having it in the community where it is needed. By the time I found a broker who was willing to do the insurance, $250,000 for 1 week of summer camp. And so I am saying that we need to make sure that the programs and the policies that we are implementing takes a holistic view to what is happening in our communities. We can't provide these services under Zozo in some communities. And then even if as members of parliament we want to assist, there are these challenges and hurdles that prevent us from doing all that we can. So I want to call us to take a look at that. The insurance in particular for summer camps in areas like the ones that I tried to do it. The truth is that if I had known that would have been the problem, I would have done what I did last year, just beg every dollar to do it, and I would not need that insurance. We have to do better than that. We have to do better than that. And I place these issues on the table because I believe that they are sufficiently important for us to bear them in mind. And every time we come to talk about Zozo, we have to remember that this is a reality, that some of us representing the people of Jamaica, that is what we face. And this is also what individuals in our communities face. We are here to help, so let us do that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hilton.
No, shut your face, man. Look, Mr. Speaker, I have, since October last year, when the debate started about Zozo, I have participated, I have watched, I have observed, I have listened, I have contributed in the discussions in the ways that I can, and I generally support the notion and the effort of Zozo in trying to arrest the issue of crime and violence in our society. But as the months go by, Prime Minister, we watch and we observe what is taking place. We begin to understand exactly what is involved in Zozo and how it's being rolled out, how it's being implemented. And we see that there are indeed successes from the Zozo. We also recognize that there is a consequent, well, I'm not sure, I believe consequential, because I think that we are seeing that with the shift in resources, and as the speaker from South St. Andrew said, the concentration of resources, both human and financial resources, in areas, it leaves other areas vulnerable and deprived. And in the Western Belt, as the speakers before me have been alluding to and amplifying, in our areas, the situation is stark. Prime Minister, your constituency adjoins mine, and you know very well what is taking place, especially on the borders. They are very tense areas. There are areas of frequent shootings, people being killed, people being maimed. And a lot of what is happening is also a cry for social intervention. The ministers, your ministers can tell you, particularly your Minister of Sport can tell you the effort that I made to make sure that we secure areas for play and for other activities in my constituency. My resources are skewed in a certain direction to make sure that we're able to assist. Luckily, we have some help from the people in the industrial belt who we ask for assistance from time to time. This morning I was with a group of them seeking further assistance to deal with drains in the constituency. Prime Minister, when you don't have light in certain areas, and those areas are the very places where the guns are barking, where people are being shot, No, don't tell me about it's my fault. That has nothing to do with, this has everything to do with the circumstances here. The dump and the operation of the dump is part of the problem in the areas of Riverton. It's the lack of proper management on the dump is a serious challenge for the communities in and around Riverton. But it goes beyond Riverton. As I said, the borderline between my constituency and the Prime Minister's is a shooting zone. It's a shooting zone. And therefore, the resources that are badly needed, we're under pressure, tremendous pressure, because the resource we get, these are transparently applied. Everyone can tell you, your minister, some of your ministers can tell you the letters I've written, the discussions I've had with them, how we allocate the limited resources. But it simply isn't enough given the challenges that we face. And so even as the Zozo sucks up the resources, both in terms of policing and social intervention, those of us who have to pay that price by ensuring that the resources shift. we are saying that this is not sustainable. It is not sustainable. And we have to take another look to see how it is that we can ensure that there is some equity in these arrangements, that there is some equity. And so, Prime Minister, I want to join those who are appealing for us to take a look. Even as the Zozo are to be supported, supported, we have to make sure that it is not to the exclusion of those other communities that are under sustained pressure, both from the absence of proper policing or social intervention. So, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm looking forward to see the response to it. Shut your face. Come over here now. Mr. Speaker, I think the Prime Minister would have heard from all the members that have spoken two things. One, no one is objecting to the zone of special operations in Denham town. But two, that the problem of crime from especially those who represent what you might call inner city communities, both in the corporate area and even in rural Jamaica and Grange Hill, are all facing problems of resurgent criminal activity or insurgent, active criminality. I don't want to belabor the points that have been made, but I think if we just, the question that arises, and a question on which certainly we would like to be united, and I believe you would also, is what is the best strategic approach that the country can take to confront this problem. If we're not careful, we're going to go into, and that's why I'm concerned about the notice that we give to the debates, because we certainly would not want, whether by appearance or in reality, for us to treat the repeated renewals as routine, as something in which we are asked to do it, and almost as if it is a kind of political trap to be set to say, well, are we going to support or not? I want to submit that what we are doing here, both in the Zozo and I dare say in the state of emergency, are at best a partial response to a big problem that the country faces. While Denham town may be quiet, in the corporate area we have had problems in Jarrett Lane, Oliver Road, Brownstown. We have had problems in Backtoe and Whitfield Town, problems over in Western St. Andrew, problems in the Maxfield corridor, going down below Rousseau Road and going down, affecting South St. Andrew, Southwest St. Andrew, and I don't want it to, nobody wants it to spill over. We've had problems in Red Hills Road. No, I'm not talking just your side of Red Hills Road. I'm talking about the lower side of Red Hills Road.
And as has been said and cannot be contradicted, at least part of the insecurity of these communities is because assets, human resource assets, mobility assets, cars, vehicles, etc., have been pulled from some parts of the city and the country and moved, whether to the zones of special operation or to the state of emergency areas. This trend, if it continues, will just make matters worse. We, all of us here in this house, and certainly us on this side, are pleased that there has been a reduction since the declaration of the state of emergency, because what was happening in St. James was so massively out of line with anything that could be tolerated. We accept that. But for all kinds of reasons, it cannot be the only part of a response. And also, I think we need to indicate, as was said quite passionately by the member from Western Westmoreland, if the suspension of rights is to become routine, even if not exercised daily, if it is to become routine, then that poses other problems over the medium term in the country, and it is something that we ought not to countenance. Ultimately, what we need to know is what do we expect to be put in place that will enable this, a cap to be put on the areas where we're seeing the resurgence of criminality. What the police officers who are proceeding to work 24/7 need to know, as well as the communities, is what are we going to put in place with more durability that will enable a law-abiding community with all rights intact to be sustained, not just in Denham town, but in Arnett Gardens, Rima, Jonestown, Whitfield Town, and all the other communities as well. We need to develop, or at least we in the Parliament need to be exposed, whether in the appropriate committees of the Parliament or in the debate, to some notion, and I'm certain the country would want to be exposed to what is the way forward that will sustain the return to a tolerably peaceable existence in the various communities across the country. It is true that we are about 20% below last year where murders are concerned. But it is also true that we are still above what it was in 2016, and even that was too high. So we need to know what is a plan that we can all work with. What do we tell our constituents about what to expect regarding police coverage, whether it's in Maxfield Park, or is in Arnett Gardens, or it is in Olympic Way or wherever. All of these things we need to know. We have no objection to Denham Town, but Denham Town is like you have an elephant and you touch the toenail on the left foot and said that is the response. We're glad for it. That is a healthy toenail, but we want to see the overall thing. And we certainly don't want to be treated to a kind of autopilot renewal that goes on and on, because that causes us to be concerned about the seriousness of purpose, and more than the seriousness of purpose, the seriousness of the engagement which is being sought of not just the opposition, but of everybody in the parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As usual, I'm grateful for the intervention in these matters for the members of the House, and I listened carefully to all the issues raised. I want to deal with, because the issues raised can be categorized, and I want to deal with the issue of the concentration of presence in the zones depleting resources to other areas. And let me say, it's both, the concentration of resources. Let me say, Mr. Speaker, that this is a fallacy. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, that the fallacy, the way in which the security forces have been deployed previously, Mr. Speaker, could only be judged by the results that they have had. And if it is the case that the previous deployment, which had no areas of concentration, yielded the kinds of results that we were seeing, particularly in the murder rate, then one would have to consider, were the deployments done wisely? Were there other issues that would have to be considered around deployment? And is it just merely deployment that has an impact on the reduction of the murder rate? So the answer to that, obviously, Mr. Speaker, is that whilst deployment is a significant part of any strategy, it is not the only element in the strategy. And having deployment where every area is covered may not necessarily be the right strategy. Deployment has to match your critical areas that have the greatest impact on the problem. And what these two strategies have done, which is the zones of special operation and the state of emergency, they have directed resources into the areas that are having the greatest impact on the crime rate in the country. Now, if members are fair to the conversation and would go back to previous debates, the clarion call, particularly from the leader of the opposition and the opposition spokesperson, was that while safety is obviously the case in the areas that have been declared under the zone, the rest of Jamaica is burning down. Recall that that was the conversation. And I stood here and I said, same thing I'm saying now, that the framework for the deployment is that we have taken, and I'm repeating it, the top 20 communities that account for 50% of the crime. Hold on. The top 20 communities have not had much rotation out of it. for the last 20 years. And what we have done, and I want the Parliament to appreciate, that we are not doing a short-term measure. That if you really want to address crime in Jamaica, if you really want to address murder, we cannot approach it as we have done for the last 20 years. We have to make a commitment to addressing these communities. Now, I depart from my conversation now. No, hold on. The member from Westmoreland, quite rightfully as an MP, as the member from Southwest St. Andrew and Western, my neighbor, stands up and defends the position of the community. Were I just the member of Parliament for West Central St. Andrew, I would do just the same. But the truth is that we have to take all the communities and take a strategic approach. No community deserves special benefit over any other. That's not what the deployment of the zones of special operations are about. We're not saying you deserve it more than any other. And the truth is that if we had taken the resources that we are deploying in the two communities and put it together and divided it up equally across all the communities, it would not have any impact. Today, we would not be able to stand in this house and say, we have reduced the murder rate by 21%. 245 Jamaicans are alive as a result of a strategic deployment and use of the resources. And I agree with you, member. We are still not where we should be, which is why we must not relent. This is why we cannot stop now. We cannot. I make the point, member, that the strategic direction that the government is going, and I had to say it to my cabinet on Monday, that we have become accustomed to a new normal where our murder rate is in the thousands. We have to get used to thinking of a lower murder rate. 500 or less is not impossible. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, 500 or less murders is within our reach if we continue to implement the strategies that we have put in place. Mr. Speaker, let me put it in another perspective. These 20 communities, and I've deliberately not named the communities because I don't want to stereotype or stigmatize any community. But the Member of Parliament for East Kingston and Port Royal stood up and spoke very feelingly about the situation that you are faced with. I made a similar speech in 2007, just before we won the elections, when my own life was threatened because I too made the statement that you have made, that I am not going to give any succor to any criminal, and I will tell what I know about the criminals. Once more MPs start to say that, then there is obviously now a great opportunity to break even the perception that there is a connection between crime and politics. And so I laud your statement because it's very important that it be said that this Parliament is not giving succor and protection to any criminal. And the measures that we are taking, we must never make it seem as if because of politics we would derail, deflate, destabilize policies that are aimed calculated to degrade and destroy the criminal networks that have held us hostage in our homes and in our communities. Today, by our actions, not only by our words, we can demonstrate that we are serious about once and for all bringing the crime monster to heel. I appeal to the good conscience of the House to pass both resolutions. Both have worked. If you look at the crime statistics, which, by the way, is shared with the opposition, not from the government, but directly through the police channels. The same information I have is the same information the leader of the opposition has. I'm saying that if, the ultimate decision that has to be made as members of parliament, the member from Westmoreland said, he's just not in support of any measure that is going to deprive the rights of the citizens of Jamaica. The member from Westmoreland. No. He said he is definitely opposed to any measure, and it is becoming increasingly difficult for him, but he is intrinsically opposed to it. And I'm just sitting in my seat and I'm wondering, how does he, and in his absence, I respectfully raise it, how does he reconcile the position of those people who cower under their beds, being deprived of their rights every single day by gunmen who shoot up their communities? It is not a false equivalency. If it is that you are talking about rights and freedoms, it is the gunmen and not us who sit in this house to make laws to liberate the people. It is the criminals that we must ensure that we get rid of them out of our society. The preservation of rights. No, I'm going to address that point. The preservation of rights starts with the secure environment, which means, as you have said, member, the right to life. And if we are at one with that, and we have given on this side and have demonstrated time and time again that in the use of extraordinary powers, the right to life is held in the highest sanctity. And we have put in place measures of accountability. All the measures that you have asked for, we have incorporated them. And we come to Parliament on every occasion where you have the opportunity to make your points publicly. And this side and myself, we absorb, we listen, and not just listen, but we act upon what you have said. This is truly, members, an opportunity to make a profound impact on the crime situation. The results are showing it. This is not me or the government alone claiming success. At the end of the day, the opposition shares in the success each time you vote for it. So, whilst I genuinely understand the need for time to review, I also ask you to understand that there is urgency. There is urgency. And that we must never in this house give the impression that we are using any other means to undermine and deflate and destabilize policies that are working. Let us once and for all rise above politics and do what is right for the people of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, I am not inclined to go any further with the debate based upon what is said. I have two apologies to make. One is to apologize for the late notice. The leader of government business informed me that he had spoken to you informally, but that would not. Well, what I'm saying is that the matter deserves notice, and I publicly extend my apologies in that regard. And Mr. Speaker, I should have followed the protocol of the House in starting my debate, which is to say, Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier, and then, Mr. Speaker, you would do your part.
Those in favour?
No.
Those against? Ayes have it.
This is on the Zozo. On the Zozo. On the Zozo. On the Zozo. Mr. Speaker,
Prime Minister.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Phillips, you didn't understand what was put? It's a responsibility of Prime Minister to... Prime Minister, it is your
Just tell
responsibility.
him, Nakal, what you're voting on.
Everybody understands.
Yeah.
The members have indicated their support for the motion before us, which is on the zones of special operations, and they have indicated for Denham Town, and they have indicated their support. On the other matter, Mr. Speaker, I will move for its suspension, and I urge my colleagues opposite that we could meet tomorrow. No, it would be a talk afterwards. Have to be tomorrow. So, Mr. Speaker, I move for the suspension of the debate.
Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, Minister, proceed.
Mr. Speaker.
Go
ahead. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the bill before you entitled the Transport Authority collection of...
Could you hold a minute to get a clarification? Samudo. Minister Montague, I will now accommodate your presentation.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker. Very grateful. Mr. Speaker, the bill before you, entitled the Transport Authority Collection of Fees, Validation and Indemnity Act 2016, seeks to validate and confirm the imposition and collection of fees by the Transport Authority in good faith.
Order, please.
And inadvertent as to their being unlawful during the period commencing on the 1st day of December 1989 and ending on the 8th day of December 2015, to indemnify the government and the Transport Authority and every person acting on behalf of the government or the Transport Authority from liability in relation thereto and for connected matters. By way of background, Mr. Speaker, the Transport Authority Act 1987 provides that the authority may, in carrying out its functions, charge and collect such fees as may be prescribed. Section 18(1) provides that, and I quote, the Minister may make regulations generally for giving effect to the provisions of this Act without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing, may, among other things, make regulations for prescribing fees. Since December 1, 1989, Mr. Speaker, the Transport Authority has been collecting fees from operators of public passenger vehicles to defray expenses connected with its regulating and monitoring responsibilities. In the absence of legislative authority for such collection, Mr. Speaker, the Transport Authority has acted in good faith. Mr. Speaker, in order to correct this anomaly, this bill has been crafted and has gone through the process and is now before the Honourable House for its consideration. Mr. Speaker, I must hasten to inform this Honourable House that the required regulations entitled the Transport Authority Fees Regulation 2015 were gazetted on December 8, 2015 to bring the Transport Authority's activities in line with the provisions of the Transport Authority Act, and in anticipation of the finalization of this bill to indemnify the authority. Mr. Speaker, this is a simple bill, two provisions to correct an anomaly that has been outstanding and to indemnify the officers of the authority who were collecting the fees before the regulations were gazetted. I therefore now, Mr. Speaker, invite other speakers and thereafter invite the House to pass this very important bill.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The opposition has no objection to this bill, and we just hope that next time, just in general, that we don't take too long to bring bills like this, and so that we can also protect those who are collecting it. So, Mr. Speaker, we have no objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, can I ask that this bill be read a second time?
Sorry. The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Clerk. You haven't read the bill.
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm the Imposition and Collection of Fees by the Transport Authority in good faith and inadvertent as to their being unlawful during the period commencing on the 1st day of December 1989 and ending on the 8th day of December 2015, to indemnify the government and the Transport Authority and every person acting on behalf of the government or the Transport Authority from liability in relation thereto and for connected matters, read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. I put clause 1. Those in favor?
Mr. Speaker.
Those against?
No, clause 1 would like the short title, the Transport Authority Validation and Indemnity Act, changed from 2016 to 2018.
Okay. I put clause 1. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, there's just one slight grammar issue in clause 2. The collection of fees, the verb 4 lines below should match that. So it should really say is hereby declared, or unless you want to say fees collected are hereby declared. It's a small point, but it seems that the grammar has a glitch which should be fixed.
Should be is.
Yeah. The collection of fees is hereby.
It follows right after the 2015 and the comma.
Was that amendment?
Thank you. I told you I have an eye for detail.
I then put clause 2. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put the preamble. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? As of it. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister.
No, it's a grammatical. That's like a type. Mr. Speaker, may I ask now that the bill be read a third time?
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm the Imposition and Collection of Fees by the Transport Authority in good faith and inadvertent as to their being unlawful during the period commencing on the 1st day of December 1989 and ending on the 8th day of December 2015 to indemnify the government and the Transport Authority and every person acting on behalf of the government or the Transport Authority from liability in relation thereto and for connected matters, read a third time and passed.
Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today, so I invite you to adjourn this Honourable House for 2 o'clock tomorrow, when we will convene again to deal with the matter that was decided on today, but have to be voted on tomorrow.
Those in favour? Those against? This House stands adjourned until 2 o'clock tomorrow. Those in favour? Those against? Ayes have it.